mentally tallying it up, 17 years as Shag. Some of you probably do know a little about me. I'm from Southern California. I lived there most of my life. I grew up with the Hollywood Hills and Beverly Hills and Malibu and the beaches and all that cool stuff you see in my art. But something a lot of people don't know about me is that I spent the first 8 years of my life living in Waikiki. So this could be called I Learned My ABCs in Waikiki, or My Childhood Amongst the Tikis. You probably know that Tikis and Polynesian stuff show up a lot in my work. And the year I was born, 1962, was the year my parents decided to move to Waikiki. So they loaded themselves, me and my brother on a plane, and we went to Hawaii. I was less than 6 months old at the time. There's Hawaii, you know. Aren't those kind of maps cool? Don't you love the maps you look at? They're little people doing things and, like, you know, fish in the sea and stuff. I actually own that map, and I don't know if any of you know this, but if you own a lot of art, you end up having to hang your stuff in the garage. So that's where that map is. So anyway, cool map, huh? Here's another little aside, which doesn't have to do with what I'm talking about today, but I've loved these maps so much, and for the last 12 years I wanted to do my own version of a map like that, but of the entire world. And it took me about 12 years to decide I probably had the ability to do that. So here's a little sneak peek of the Shag map of the world. You can see it? Kind of tells you where all the cocktails were born and what things to do when you're in South America. Get some shrunken heads, eat some steak, you know. A little close-up. The islands where the great tikis came from. Anyway, this is going to be published in a book coming out in November, published by Utrecht Gallery Press. It's going to be kind of a lot of other things in the book as well, but that's going to be in that book. So you guys are the first people on earth who've seen it, aside from me, my family, and the publisher of the book. So 1962, the year I moved to Hawaii. What a great year. That was the year that Hawaii was really cool, obviously. That was the year Elvis released the movie and the album Blue Hawaii. I couldn't even talk, so I don't remember that. That was the year that the USS Arizona Memorial was created and dedicated. Have any of you been to that? Yeah. It's pretty cool. It's creepy too. That was the year of the Seattle World's Fair, when Dole, the company that seemed to own 3/4 of Hawaii, decided they wanted a Hawaii pavilion at the fair. There's another shot of it. Look at the really cool sign on top. I don't know if you can see that. Hawaii. Like all of these things, it looked a lot better in the planning stages. But, you know, Dole was everywhere when I was a kid. That was, you know, it was just a fact of life in my first 8 years. You know, that's Andrew Carnegie, you know, steel magnate. That's J.P. Getty, oil guy. And that's James Dole, a billionaire from pineapples. Wouldn't you rather be a billionaire from pineapples than from oil or steel? Anyway, he had a lot to do with shaping Hawaii. When I was a kid, I drove past that every day. That's a big water tank shaped like a pineapple. And you could smell the pineapple factory, we called it as a kid, the pineapple factory, which smelled like burning sugar. Another view. I think that was built in the 1940s, actually. Look at that. So Dole owned the island of Lanai. And have any of you guys heard in the last couple months what happened to the island of Lanai? Yes. An internet billionaire, the founder of Oracle, bought the entire island. Well, 98% of the island. There's 2% he doesn't own. And they won't say how much he paid, but they estimate it was $800 million. So the first thing that I did is I pulled out my calculator and I figured out that's $6,000 an acre. Can you buy an acre of land for $6,000 anywhere in the Denver metro area? So in the islands of Hawaii, you know, and that's not a little piddly island, that's one of the 7 major islands, and he owns the whole thing. I'm hoping he builds a huge supervillain there or something, you know. I don't know what he's going to do with it, and he's not saying. Anyway, I thought that was pretty cool. Another cool sort of map shot of the islands. Does that make you want to go there? Just that happy sun. I mean, how can you not be intrigued and not be pulled into it? Oh, speaking of Dole, this is something recent. You're the first people to have seen this also. I did this for Disneyland. Some of you might know the Enchanted Tiki Room is having its 50th anniversary next year. So I did this painting for Disneyland. And the first thing they did when they saw it is they said, we can't have Dole Whip in that painting. And I said, without the Dole Whip, it's nothing. It's useless. So they said, well, we'll talk to the lawyers. And it took 3 months, you know, going back and forth and me saying, without the Dole Whip, the painting's gone. There's nothing there. And finally the lawyer said, yeah, you can put the Dole Whip in. So, have any of you guys had the Dole Whip at Disneyland? Yeah. If you go to Disneyland, this is the weird thing you'll notice. The line to get in the Tiki Room, well, there is no line usually. You can walk right into the little courtyard. But then the line to get the Dole Whip is like 30 people long. So people prefer Dole Whip to the Enchanted Tiki Room, which I can't wrap my head around, but that's the way it is. That is a Dole fruit stand in Hawaii, a roadside fruit stand, which kind of shows you all the power that Dole had. I love pineapples, by the way. That's my favorite fruit. That's the world's largest maize on one of their plantations. You can see there's a little pineapple in the middle you can get lost in. Obviously, pineapples are they show up a lot in my art. The little guy there sitting at the table is Pineapple Head. There he is again. When I was a kid, back in California, so I would have been 9 or 10, I was in the Cub Scouts and we went camping, and the den master told a scary story around the campfire, and it was called Pineapple Head. So it left an impression on me, obviously. There's more of them. More pineapples in my art. Anyway, that's me in preschool. I don't know if you can pick me out in that picture. You know, when you're a little kid, weird things happen and they seem sort of weird to you, but it's not until you're a grown-up you realize, no, that didn't really happen. When I went to this school, every morning we had to sing patriotic songs, and we had to sing Aloha Oi, which is a Hawaiian song. And a 6th grader always got to run, back then it was a record player. He got to run the record player and we sang along to the music. And 6th graders were responsible enough to actually get to plug the record player into the wall. And I remember watching a 6th grader, and it was his turn, and he plugged it into the wall, and there was a big flash of light, and he was gone. And I believed that until I was about 9 or 10 years old. I believed that's what would happen if you got shocked when you were plugging something in. That's the first place I lived when I was in Hawaii, Tropicana Apartments. Pretty appropriate. Obviously that's a more recent picture. They didn't have those, well, they had Fiats back then, but not like that. And one of my very first memories, actually my very first memory ever of anything I can remember on Earth is being about 3 years old and going out the front door of my apartment and looking at the front lawn, you know, bright green front lawn in Hawaii. And amongst the blades of grass were hundreds of thousands of green caterpillars, the same color as the lawn. And they were wriggling amongst the blades of grass, so it looked like the whole lawn was alive. And that's the very first memory I have of anything. So obviously green is very important to me. That's, you know, probably inspired by my youth in Hawaii. There's some green, a lot of tikis. The tiki thing is one of those things that I I think it was all subconscious. You know, I don't think it was something I thought about until I was probably in my early 20s, you know. First 8 years of my life, they were everywhere. They were all around me, so I didn't pay any attention to them. It was like a tree or a sidewalk. That's where we'd go shopping when I was a kid. There'd be a band like that playing, you know. To me, that was normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary about that. In that same international marketplace, there was a Trader Vic's, which my parents and my upbringing was LDS Mormon, so they didn't make it in there very much, but I remember walking by and looking at it and thinking, that place looks really cool. So obviously, it left an impression too. And that's the very first, I call that Shag painting number 1. There's a Shag painting 0 too, but this is kind of the first painting I ever did when I thought, I want to paint what I want to paint, not what a client wants me to paint, because I had worked as a commercial illustrator for about 10 years. And I was forced to sit down one day because my friend had booked me an art show and think about, what am I going to do? How am I going to make a painting? What do I want to paint? So the first thing I thought is, well, nobody's going to buy it, so I want to hang it on the wall of my own house. And what do I want on the wall of my own house? And that's what I wanted. It didn't work out that way, actually, thank God. But 1962 also, actually 1961, the year before I got there, unfortunately, the United States' first revolving restaurant was built in Honolulu. And this is the Ala Moana Center, Ronde. And when I was a little kid, I would beg my mom to take me there almost every day. She took me there once, the thing rotated, you know, that was probably one of the defining experiences of my life. So the, you know, revolving restaurant, the round room, that kind of thing made a huge impression on me. Unfortunately, this place isn't open anymore, but a couple years later, another one in Honolulu opened, which is top of Waikiki. And that one is still there, and that one's still revolving. Cool signage. There you see round rooms and revolving rooms appearing in my paintings. Sydney, another round room. And I have this weird thing, when I go to a new city, I always ask my host, is there a revolving restaurant in the city? And a lot of times they don't even know, you know, and I'm like, well, just drive downtown and look for a round thing on top of a building. And we'll do that, and sometimes we'll find them. I was in Washington, D.C. and asked that question, and they said, I don't think so. So somebody checked it out, and there was, and so we went there, and it was like an R&B karaoke bar. So you had to get up and sing Michael Jackson while the room spun. And I remember the group of, it was a few artists, myself and the gallery owner, and everyone else in the revolving restaurant was black. And they would get up, and every karaoke singer had an incredible voice, you know? So as soon as they'd get off, I'd say the same thing. Have you tried out for American Idol yet? I'd always say, I'm 55 years old, I can't do that. That's the first house my parents ever bought right there on Hoakoa Street. Had a great view of the city. And then I went to elementary school, Kahala Elementary. I'm in the lower right-hand corner, the big fake smile. There's my school. Actually lived right across the street from the school. And going back to the color green, in school, in kindergarten, you know, you're assigned certain chores, you gotta clean this up or do that. And one day we were painting in class, and I was assigned to clean up. So what that meant is the rest of the class went in to sing songs, and I had to put all the paint away. And there was this big plastic container of green paint, and I was carrying it by the lid, and it dropped, and the green paint splashed all over me, from head to toe. You know, it was green tempera paint. And I was completely embarrassed, but I had to go back into class, and everybody laughed and pointed. And it was nap time shortly after that. So my little nap mat was over by the art supplies, and there was a girl who napped next to me. Let me see if I can get back to her picture. You know, this is a long time ago, but I think she's the one on the top right with sort of the smug look on her face. She decided that the best thing to do would be to cut all the green paint out of my hair. So she did that, and then I went home, and you know, a lot of kids have gone through that. Your mom screams and cuts all the rest of your hair off. Anyway, that's about the color of the green that I was covered with. And again, it shows up in my artwork at all times. Isn't that a lovely color? I mean, you know. Hawaiian girl, lots of green stuff. Another thing when I was a kid was, this was my other favorite place to go besides the Revolving restaurant. This was the Kahala Hilton. And my aunt would take me here for lunch sometimes. The thing was surrounded by ponds and pools full of dolphins and fish, turtles, stingrays, sharks. You know, how could you not love that as a kid? And there were no railings, and there were also stepping stones across the pond. So, you know, I guess America hadn't become Sue happy by then, you know. So, you know, my aunt would let her 4-year-old, 5-year-old nephew run across the stones between the sharks and the stingrays. You know. And what does that make you think of? Supervillain lair, Thunderball, the swimming pool with the sharks. Or You Only Live Twice, the pond with the piranhas. Those two movies, Thunderball and You Only Live Twice, are the first grown-up movies my parents let me see. And actually took me to a double feature at a drive-in, and they did that thing parents did back then, that thing. They pulled the station wagon in backwards so you can lie down in the back and watch the movie. And that is probably the most instrumental incident in the whole career of Shag right there, was seeing those two movies. Because suddenly it went from Mary Poppins and Snow White to James Bond and supervillains, and I've never been the same. Supervillains. Kung Fu fighters. More supervillains with yachts. More supervillains. More awesome black women. Anyway, I was talking about the shopping center with the Revolving restaurant. This is it. It's a current picture. That's an artist's rendering, which kind of looks more like it was when I was there. It was full of tikis and modernist architecture and Polynesian, modern futuristic Polynesian things like that. That's part of it. Another thing. That's where I went shopping as a kid. I mean, you know, look at that thing. I want that thing in my yard. Anyway, obviously water features still play a big part in my paintings. Hawaiian shirts, tikis, more tikis, hula girls. Oh, yeah. Another very instrumental thing in my youth and me turning into Shag was my favorite show when I was 7 years old, Hawaii 5-0. And I had the pleasure of having a scene filmed 2 houses down from my house for one of the episodes in the 2nd season. And all I got to see was Jack Lord in a car. There he is. That car right there, a Mercury Park Lane, pull into a driveway while they filmed him, and then get out of the car and go into the house. And then some person would get into the car, pull it out, he'd come out of the house, get into the car, pull into the driveway, get out of the car, and go into the house. And he did that 4 times, and I thought that was probably the most amazing thing I'd ever seen in my life. He was an art collector too. I didn't learn this until, well, I was putting this presentation together actually. That's a Wan Gris painting. I checked, one of them recently sold for $28 million, so it's not a cheap little painting, you know. But that's okay. When he died, his estate was worth $40 million, so he was also an artist himself. I wish I had a suave art outfit like that when I painted. There he is again. That's one of his works. It's chickens fighting, I think. That's him. That's Jack Lord and his wife and Elvis. To Jack, all my respect, always a friend, Elvis Presley. And then, of course, there was the super villain on the show too. His name was Wo Fat, an agent of the Red Chinese. He was like the Bond villains. He always had the coolest gear. He was, you know, the coolest hideaways. What is it with super villains and their hideaways? Who's the architect that's designing all those things? And of course, if you design a super villain lair, you have to be assassinated afterwards because you know all the secrets. So it's not a great career to be in, I'm guessing. Anyway, there's a painting. You can see Jack Lord, well, Agent McGarrett in the foreground and Wo Fat in the back. It's more Hawaiiana stuff. Just kind of the stuff that was all around when I was a kid. Didn't pay attention. Wanted some nuts, that's what they came in. Wanted to go to the bank, that's what it looked like. Wanted to go eat, that's where you went. Oh, this is my house now. That's obviously tiki mugs. That's about a quarter of my collection. In the house I live in, fortunately, the dining room is lined with glass cases, just like that, and so the whole thing is full of tiki mugs. The tiki thing, I told you, it didn't really reappear in my consciousness until I was in my 20s. When I was around 21, some friends of mine and I decided we wanted to go see all the cool, we call them old man bars, you know, the kind of bars you go into and nobody was there but old men. And some of them were actually tropical bars, and those were the ones we loved the most because you could pay an extra $5 and keep the ceramic mug, which was kind of like our souvenir for the evening. So we began sort of amassing our collections. This is like 84, 85, you know. Way early on, we thought we were the only 3 people on Earth who liked tikis or liked any of this old stuff. And it became this sort of like competition amongst the 3 friends to build up our tiki collections. And at the time, we assumed we were the only 3 people on Earth. But if you're going against 2 other people who are collecting the same thing, that's it, man. It's, you know, zero tolerance. You gotta have it. So that's kind of how I built my collection of tiki mugs and other tiki artifacts. More tiki, you know. Oh, look at that kind of architecture. I want to live in a house that looks like that. That's a hotel in Hawaii. Another, same hotel, water features. If you guys saw my talk on Friday, you know the importance of water features. Restaurant, typical restaurant in Hawaii. Typical matchbook in Hawaii. That's the beach we always went to as a kid. My mom would take us to the beach twice a week. We went to Queen Surf Beach. I remember when I was 4 years old, maybe 5, finding a book of matches on the beach, which to a 5-year-old, that's the coolest thing you can find. And I remember lighting it and the tip of my finger catching on fire. Just like that. And then dipping it in the ocean and riding home trying to hide from my mother the fact that I had a 3rd-degree burn on my index finger. Anyway, here's some paintings sort of inspired by the whole Polynesian thing. These were from a series I did about 10 years ago exactly, called Night of the Tiki. And there were 15 paintings, all based on tropical bars and tikiana. Hula girls, pineapples, cocktails, volcanoes. Going a little faster, running out of time. The thing about this set of paintings, and the thing no one really realized at the time, is if you stuck them all together, they make a complete, uninterrupted tableau that happens in the same bar. So if somebody had been clever enough to buy all 15 paintings and join them together like that, they could have had the entire series, and that was called Night of the Tiki. Anyway, I'm gonna finish now. Charles Phoenix is gonna be up in about half an hour. You guys definitely have to stick around to see him. You won't forget it. Thank you guys, and I hope I get a little insight into the reason I paint all those weird tikis in my art. Thank you guys.